Okay, Matthew chapter 19. Jesus, he had no fear of controversial subjects. And by the way, many of the subjects that you or I would think of as controversial were not controversial in Jesus' day. And let's take a look at chapter 19. When Jesus had finished saying these things, he left Galilee and went into the region of Judea to the other side of the Jordan, which that'd be in what is present day Jordan. Large crowds followed him and he healed them there. Well, there's a reason why people followed Jesus. They, they wanted to be healed. In verse 3, some Pharisees came to him to test him. This was their MO. I almost said it was their hobby because it seemed like, with rare exception, they confronted Jesus in order to try and catch him in something. Well, here they go with another test. They asked, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any and every reason?" Now, Jewish tradition and the tradition of the rabbis, which had often, for many religious Jews, and there were pretty much no non-religious Jews in Jesus' day, but they put as much weight on the traditions of the rabbis, which was called the Mishnah, as the actual words of God, which was called the Torah. And the rabbis had taken a very, I don't know what to call it, liberal view of divorce. In the Mishnah, the rabbis said it was okay to divorce your wife for any and every reason. In other words, it was all up to the husband, and it wasn't based on fairness at all, in my opinion anyway. There was a passage there in the Mishnah where the teaching was, if your wife burned your breakfast, you could divorce her. If she was no longer pleasing to your eye, you could divorce her. So pretty much the tradition had become, you could divorce your wife for any and every reason. In verse 4, Jesus begins to speak. "Haven't you read," he replied, "that at the beginning the Creator made them male and female?" Pause. There are, I don't want to be mean-spirited and unkind, but just have to tell you what it looks like to me. In our world, in our culture, there are many delusional people who believe there are more than two genders. This trend is just plain stupid. I'm sorry. The transgender movement, I think, and I don't want to be unnecessarily unkind, but man, that doesn't come from the hand of God. That to me seems satanic in nature. And to believe that there are all kinds of genders and sexes. I just think that's dumb. Science doesn't support it. Common sense doesn't support it. And the words of Christ really don't support it. There's just two genders. God, in the beginning, made male and female. You can, I just, I'm trying to, my hesitancy is, part of me wants to just be flat out, no holds barred, just to say, if you're thinking that, don't be stupid. If you're thinking that there are more genders, there are more sexes, no, there's not. It bothers me that we have state and city governments that are enacting all kinds of laws and policies in support of the idea that there are many genders, and that whatever you want yours to be, you should have the right to go and have it made. Oh, and by the way, if you got a 4-year-old who wants to be, who is a boy, but born a boy, but wants to become a girl, send them out and have it done. I just believe that's from the pit of hell. First of all, I've known a lot of 4-year-olds. They don't know what they want, really. I mean, let me back up. They know what they want, but they don't have the background to be able to sift through the consequences of choices. They're learning to do that. Teenagers, there are very few teenagers that have the background to be able to make those kinds of choices. It's just, okay, keep going. Verse 5, the Creator said, "For this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh." There's another trend. I'm one of the guys, seems like I'm preaching against everything. But I have to say some things. I just have to. There's a trend away from marriage. The idea, and this is not a new trend. When I was in high school in the 60s, one of the big trends was you just do your own thing. If you're not hurting anybody, then it can't be wrong. And why would you marry? Gosh. Well, I think there is a reason why you would marry, and why not marrying. Somebody may have a case that where not marrying would fit with God's design, but I've never seen it before. God's design is that a man would leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they would become one flesh. The simple way to say it is one man for one woman for a lifetime. When Jesus taught about divorce, he taught about divorce in the context of God's original design for marriage. Should everybody marry? Jesus never said that. But there are problems when the numbers of people who are not marrying increase. And I could talk a lot about that, but I'm not going to. They will become one flesh. Okay. You're adults, and you realize there is a literal sense of this. where in sexual intercourse we become literally bonded as one. And then there is a spiritual and an emotional bonding that takes place. I am very grateful that God, in spite of my dumbness, God has given me the perfect wife for me. She's not perfect, but she's perfect for me. And we are one flesh. Well, he goes on and he says, so they are no longer two, but one. Therefore, what God has joined together, let man not separate. Our culture disregards that. Marriage in our culture, as you know, is considered a throwaway agreement. There is, the no-fault marriage thing, no-fault divorce thing. It's like you don't even need. There was a time in our country where for a divorce to be granted, there had to be a reason. And that time is long gone. You divorce because you don't want to be married anymore. I've counseled couples where one or both of the people in that marriage just didn't want to be married anymore. They're tired of the hassle. In verse 7, the Pharisees go on. Why then, they asked, did Moses command that a man give his wife a certificate of divorce and send her away? Jesus replied, Moses permitted you to divorce your wives because your hearts were hard. And it was not this way from the beginning. I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife except for marital unfaithfulness and marries another woman commits adultery. The exception to the rule of one woman, one man for a lifetime is sexual infidelity. I have dear friends who this is what happened to them. They loved their spouse, were committed to their spouse, were willing to go the distance with their spouse, but their spouse committed adultery. They had sex with someone other than their spouse after they were married. And in many of those cases, the offending spouse was just simply not interested in repairing the damage that had done. But I do have the experience of the offending spouse truly repenting and going through a process of pretty difficult work to reestablish trust in the relationship. So what Jesus is not saying is if your spouse steps out on you and commits adultery, you should divorce them. No, he says that's the only time it would be permissible. And I wonder if Jesus would maybe, of course we don't get this. We don't have this, that he said this. So it's probably silly to think about it. But I kind of believe Jesus would say, I would prefer that you restore and redeem this broken relationship. God's design is not altered by our cultural expediency. There are only two sexes, and marriage is between one woman and one man for a lifetime. And that covenant can only be broken and disregarded if one of those partners commits sexual adultery. Okay. So there you go. I'll see you next time. Whoa! What I hope will be a better So Care with Stevie Boy.